My name is Lisa Minardi. I'm executive director of Historic Trappe. And working in a museum, you do a whole lot of different things, wear a lot of hats. So I oversee our staff, our curatorial team, research, archives, library. Also, we have a big restoration project going on, which we'll be talking more about. So I help to oversee that as well, and do a lot of fundraising to keep all these projects and people going at the organization.
And my name is Emily Sneff. I'm historian and consulting curator here at Historic Trappe. And my role has been thinking about the ways that we can meet the moment for the 250th, doing research on the Muhlenberg family who lived in the houses that we have the privilege to interpret, and also kind of putting Trappe on the map as we think about the anniversary of the founding of the United States.
So I really became involved, I would say, when I was 8 years old, and I went to a colonial crafts day camp at a historic site called the Peter Wentz Farmstead, which is run by Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And I love the hands-on aspects of what we were doing and learning, in the camp. It was a Pennsylvania German historic site, so I really became interested in that culture and history. And then as an undergraduate at Ursinus College, where I studied history and museum studies. I learned about, first of all, the Muhlenberg family from Trappe and amazing primary sources that survived, and really got hooked on that. And then particularly about the home of Frederick Muhlenberg, which we call the Speaker's House today, was going to be torn down to build a CVS. And I didn't want to see that happen. So joined a grassroots effort to help rescue the building. And I've been involved for over 20 years now with the organization, and just super excited to see it grow and to be part of that, from as a teenager all the way to now as director of the organization.
My research as a historian for the past decade has focused on the Declaration of Independence. And so leading up to 2026, I saw an opportunity to engage with museums and public facing sort of avenues to get my research out, but also to make people think about the Declaration of Independence differently. So for the past couple of years, I've been a consulting curator for a few different institutions. And I chose to come here and work for Historic Trappe because this is my backyard. This is where I grew up, and I wanted to do something very local for the 250th. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on Philadelphia, but we're not that far outside of Philadelphia. And so once I got connected with Lisa and saw how energetic Historic Trappe was as an organization, it seemed like a great opportunity to think about the 250th from a different perspective.
The Muhlenberg family history begins in Pennsylvania in 1742, when Henry Melchior Muhlenberg is sent from Germany, really as a missionary pastor, to help really establish and organize the Lutheran Church in America, and specifically to be pastor of three congregations, one here in Trappe, one in a nearby area called New Hanover, and then the big congregation in Philadelphia. He proves himself a very capable administrator, an organizer. He founds the Lutheran Ministerium of Pennsylvania here in Trappe, and just spends the next 45 years of his life, getting the church organized, writing church constitutions, helping fundraise, build churches, on and on and on. But then, so he marries a daughter of Conrad Weiser, who's a well-known, treaty negotiator between colonial Pennsylvania and various Native American groups. So he marries Anna Maria Weiser, or Mary as she was called. They make their first home here in Trappe. They have 11 children together, 7 of whom survive to adulthood. And in particular, their 3 sons are getting to be well known, but certainly were very influential. Their oldest son, General Peter Muhlenberg, he serves in the American Revolution and then in Congress. Their middle son, Frederick Muhlenberg, serves in everything, the Continental Congress, county politics. He's Speaker of Pennsylvania's House. He chairs Pennsylvania's Constitutional Convention. And then he's the first Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, and again in the Third Congress. But so very, very important, founding figure. And then the third son, Henry Jr., He takes after dad, it would seem. He's the only one who remains a Lutheran pastor. All three boys were originally ordained as Lutheran pastors, but only Henry Jr. remains. But he also is very important as a botanist. He's known as the American Linnaeus when he dies. And he's the founding president of what would now be Franklin and Marshall College. So he was involved early on in education too. So they're all remarkable, and the women are fascinating as well, and their stories. And most of them marry Lutheran pastors, not too surprising. One is a rebel and marries an Irish immigrant, and has an interesting story. So they're just an incredible family. And the fact that there's diaries, there's letters, there's papers, there's so much that survives in terms of primary sources. And then when you also add to that, we have their churches, their houses, portraits, silver, furniture. It's just a material culture historian's dream come true in studying this family. At Historic Trappe, we engage with lots of different publics, I would say, from school groups who visit us, all the way up to, community members. Some of them are very involved in a hands-on way with the restoration projects that we have going on. They help give tours of the historic house museums that we have, help with collections work behind the scenes with archiving. We get a lot of inquiries about, maybe people who are descendants of local families, looking for help with genealogy or how do they research the history of their house. And then we get people who have, no familiarity whatsoever with us, and just, they're here as tourists, or they're, bringing family friends, on vacation to come see the local history. So it's a whole range of folks. A lot of our sites relate to the Muhlenberg family of, Pennsylvania German fame, if you will, and, helping to convey, who the Muhlenbergs were, and why they were so important in the founding of the nation, and, the role of the Pennsylvania Germans in that. I think is a big challenge for us, the name recognition, first of all, of the family, and, trying to get that on people's radar. Get a lot of questions about, Muhlenberg College and if we have anything to do with that. So trying to explain, yes, it was named after the family, but it started here in our town of Trappe is really important to us. And, getting beyond this kind of English dominated stereotype of colonial America, and that these families like the Muhlenbergs, who were German speaking immigrants, were a huge part of contributing to the new nation. It's both a challenge and an opportunity for us to convey that, for sure.
2026 offers a really special opportunity for Historic Trappe at 3 of our properties. So starting with the building where we are today, the Dewey's Tavern, which is the Center for Pennsylvania German Studies and is our primary museum exhibition space, we'll have a special exhibit called Window to Revolution, which focuses on Pennsylvania Germans' experience of the American Revolution in ways that are similar but also different from their English descended neighbors. And so that exhibition will take over every room in this historic tavern, and really set up people to understand the historic houses as well as the area's history during the Revolution better. On view will be a number of different types of artifacts, but one highlight will be Henry Muhlenberg's handwritten journals in German. And as visitors go down the street to the Muhlenberg House, those journals, the stories within those pages will come to life as they walk through the Muhlenberg House. So in addition to marking the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War more broadly, we're also marking the 250th anniversary of the Muhlenberg family moving into their house on Main Street in Trappe. They were in Philadelphia when independence was declared, and the following week they moved back to Trappe, in part to escape the war and to feel a bit safer rather than being in the de facto capital of the United States. So Henry, Mary, and their youngest child, their daughter Sally, moved into the house in mid-July 1776. So we'll be having a sort of reenactment of that move-in as part of our living history demonstrations and programs that we'll be having all through next year. And after people tour the Muhlenberg House and they get a sense of how this home acted as a refuge for people who were escaping the war, a place for family members and congregation members to send their most treasured belongings to protect them from the British, a place where more than 30 people stayed at one point. And if you see the house and you walk through it, you think, how did this many people stay on this property? So after that experience of wartime, visitors will head further down the street to the speaker's house. And to me, that kind of concludes the story, because once you win your independence, you win the Revolutionary War, what happens next? And of course, that involves politics and setting up new governments and protecting the rights of the people that had been fought for during the Revolution. And Frederick Muhlenberg's political career speaks to all of that. He was the first signer of the Bill of Rights as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. He was involved in the founding of Montgomery County, which separated from Philadelphia County. So when we have visitors as well as students come and visit the Speaker's House, which will open to the public after a 25-year restoration, they'll get an opportunity to learn about this founding father in our backyard, this person who's actually more approachable than George Washington or John Adams or the founders from other states, because you can walk through his house and you can think about what it was like to commute to Philadelphia from Trappe, or to have the first court sessions take place in a room in your house. And so we're really excited to have these 3 sites open to the public next year. And we're also going to have our exhibit and the houses open beyond 2026. So we're thinking about the anniversaries that continue after July 4th, especially when the war came to the Trappe area in the fall of 1777. The landscape for public humanities at the moment is facing a lot of challenges, especially in terms of finances and finding support for nonprofit institutions right now. There's been a lot of uncertainty. And in our region, in the greater Philadelphia area, we're anticipating huge numbers of people coming to this area for everything that 2026 has to offer. But how do we actually reach those people? That's a huge challenge and opportunity. I work for a number of different places, and one of the things that appealed to me about Historic Trappe is the opening of the Speaker's House after so many years of restoration, because that was a trademark of the bicentennial. There were a lot of historic homes and sites that opened to the public for 1976, and that's not really something that's happening for 2026. So we're pretty unique within the landscape. And it creates, a whole nother house for people to visit, a whole nother experience for people to walk through, a great opportunity for field trips and students to come and engage with early American politics. And as someone who grew up in the Trappe area, who had no idea about Frederick Muhlenberg and has driven past his house my whole life, it's great to see this story come to life and potentially inspire young people in particular, the same way that the bicentennial inspired the next generation of historians and political figures. So my hope is that by having this house open to the public, we'll reach a lot of people. That also is a challenge, because it means our organization has experienced a ton of growth very quickly. So dealing with those growing pains, figuring out simple things like, how do we offer enough tours? How do we have people feel comfortable giving tours for 3 different buildings? That's a lot of information, even for one family. So we want to do what we can to meet this moment, but also stretch ourselves within our capacities and really think about the visitor's experience and making sure that they walk away having learned and discovered something new and perhaps a new perspective for the 250th.
You've already heard a lot about our exciting plans that we've been working on for 26 and 27, but one that we haven't mentioned is an initiative called the Perkiomen Valley 250. And so we're really trying to put Historic Trappe into, a much greater regional context, here within Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and, realizing that things didn't just happen in 1776, but 1777 and into 78 with the Valley Forge encampment being in our region, the battles of Brandywine and Germantown, being nearby. And the Continental Army was encamped all throughout our area, including marching literally up and down our main street and storing their stuff, and putting soldiers into houses, barns, and even the Augustus Lutheran Church here in Trappe. So Emily and I are spearheading this Perkiomen Valley 250 initiative, to help lift up all of the nonprofits and historic sites and community organizations in our area, and really help to market the region to tourists as well as to locals, to make a convenient way for finding out, gee, what's going on in the area. It's a lot more than just fireworks and parades on the 4th of July. It's about a 2.5 year long commemoration that we're looking to promote. And so just making sure people have that information, including hotels and restaurants, and where do we go? Where do we stay? What else can we do? There's amazing open space in our area with great parks and trails for people to access as well. So, we're really trying to look broadly at our region, and promoting that strongly with all these partners. And I think one of my biggest piece of advice would be, this is a marathon, not a sprint. That to take some deep breaths, take the long view of America's 250th anniversary, and to plan all sorts of events, big, small, and in between. Things that appeal to kids and families. Maybe there's hands-on programs for adults, a mix of more academic and more popular things. Tours, exhibitions. I mean, any one of those can feel overwhelming or sounds like a lot, but if you're spreading it over 2 years or 2.5 years, it gives you time, to develop that, to build up your volunteer base, get some people trained to help you with the programs, that you don't have to do it all yourself, and you don't have to do it all at once either.
I think one great way to weather what can be a challenging field of public humanities is to become the person for a particular subject. If you have an expertise that you can build up, whether it's like me about a particular document, a particular year, a particular type of material culture, you can learn all about that thing and then transfer those skills to other types of jobs. But becoming the sought after person, or having an expertise that is particularly timely or valuable, makes people seek you out in a way that it can be hard to get on people's radar otherwise. My other piece of advice would be look in your own backyard, engage with the sites that are in your area. Maybe your college is located in proximity to other places. When I was a grad student teaching at William & Mary, I would send my students to the printing office. They had that great opportunity that was within walking distance from campus. But really think about what's around you. It doesn't mean that you need to be a hyper-local historian, but you can learn about a place, how it operates, what different audiences it reaches, without having to travel. And you can maybe find a really strong connection, like I found to Historic Trappe. Having lived in this area and not really understood the history, I'm able to take that and then kind of spread it to the people who I talk to or give tours to. So those would be my two pieces of advice. And just stick with it, because it can be challenging to find a job. It can be challenging to kind of think about the long term in public humanities, but especially as we approach these important anniversaries, it's worthwhile work.